Hey there, it's January 11th, 2023. It's a Wednesday, and welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. I am, of course, Cory Morgan. This is the Western Standard's weekly live show where I get into some issues. I have guests on, I rant, I rave, and of course, I interact with you guys whenever I can. So that reminder with us being live, make use of that comment scroll, guys. Get in there, converse with each other, send questions my way, send them to the guests, chat with each other. I've seen some great conversations coming up in the chat scroll, or even discussion subjects I never even thought of for the show, and is brought up from within there. Again, just try to keep it civil, though. If we really want to get scrapping and fighting, get onto Twitter. We can, fight at length and be nasty to each other there. And let's, keep things relatively decent here. So good to see you. You got Debbie and Tabor, Scott and Fort Mac, Paradoxy, and Mr. Stanley all checking in, and lots of others coming in on the show. I got a good one today. Dave Naylor's back, so we'll be checking in with him in a little bit here on the news and items that are going on. As well, I got Michelle Stirling from Friends of Science. A lot of people are familiar with her. She's been on the show before. A great one to talk to, a resource to talk about, of course, Justin's great transition. And just transition, I should say. Certainly great in his little world or mind. And we'll break that down and have some talk about that. And of course, the ag check-in. So good to see the rest of you there. Elmer, Kevin, Tracy, all the regulars are in today. It's good to see. Just a note and a heads up. I mentioned it a bit before too. I am going to be taking off for a couple of weeks. I will be putting things up, the audio on the podcast during that time. There will be some content and probably write some columns and things, but this full show for 2 weeks won't be on. I'll be down in the desert there in Arizona for a bit, taking a bit of a breather. So just giving you that warning. So the rant on things right now. So you might be familiar with the saying, justice delayed is justice denied. And I mean, it's an apt saying. It's a good one. I was speaking actually to Ty Northcott last night. You might remember him. He ran the big illegal rodeo in Alberta during the COVID restrictions. Well, his next court date over that is coming up in this June. That'll be more than 2 years since the rodeo was held, I believe. And who knows how long before that's all finished. Now, Section 11 of the Charter covers the rights for people who've been charged with offenses. Subsection B states the person has a right to be tried within a reasonable time. Now, reasonable, that's a subjective term, and it's open to interpretation. In Canada, the waiting list to get on trial, though, is becoming unreasonable by any interpretation. A trial has been scheduled for April 2024 for 3 men who were charged with mischief over 5,000 for their alleged roles in the Coutts border blockade during the truckers' convoy protests last year. That'll be 26 months after the alleged offense. Now, while the term mischief makes the charge sound minor, the men charged could be sentenced to as long as 10 years for that offense. So is it fair or humane to keep them waiting for over 2 years with such penalties hanging over their heads? I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of whether or not the charges against these particular men or the potential sentence is appropriate. That's a separate issue for a separate show. They are entitled to defend themselves in a court in a timely manner, though, and they won't be getting that. In 2016, the Supreme Court in Canada put its foot down and set a ceiling of 30 months for Superior Court trials and 18 months for provincial court. Yeah, those numbers represented what the Supreme Court wanted to bring the times down to at that time. Now, when a person is awaiting trial, their life is in limbo. They aren't convicted of anything, yet they're living under limitations. They might be held in remand for that period, or they might be released with bail conditions. They usually can't legally travel, and they certainly can't make any long-term life plans when they don't know if they're going to be incarcerated for a period of time in the future. Now, in a system when a person is presumed innocent, they're enduring quite a bit of punishment before they have a chance to try and prove their innocence. These waits also, of course, increase pressure upon people charged to plead down to lesser offenses just to get it all over with. It's a pretty rough choice to make if you believe yourself to be innocent. Now, of course, not everybody waiting for trial is innocent. I mean, most of them are probably guilty. Due to the long waits for these trials, though, the resources in remand and such are becoming scarce. Criminals that should have been considered too dangerous for bail are often released due to pressures to relieve remand space. Prosecutors and judges, again, they're more inclined to pursue plea bargains to try and catch up with some of the backlog as well. So some terribly dangerous people are getting light sentences due to this. Now, justice reform rarely becomes an election issue, but it really should. The government is too big and intrudes into our lives in way too many ways as it is, but one area that they should be involved in is justice. Policing and justice are clear areas where we need government authority, and we're starving for both of them. The protection of the public from crime should be a prime priority for governments, and they're failing. We need to increase expenditures and expand our criminal trial ability. I mean, justice reform Yeah, it just isn't a flashy issue, and it isn't an easy one to deal with. Solutions to the backlogs in the court system, they aren't going to come fast. Recruiting and retaining more prosecutors, public defenders, and judges can't be done overnight, and it won't come cheap, but it has to be done all the same. Currently, the system is failing. Citizens charged with crimes and it's failing the citizens who have been charged with crimes. It's failing the citizens who want to be protected from the criminals. I mean, if the government can't maintain even a justice system, what the hell good is it? All right. Well, that's what's got me going today with our justice system. That's 2 weeks of justice in a row. I'll come up with something fresh when I get back from the desert. So let's get on and check in with Dave in the newsroom and see what else is going on out there in the world today. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
Good. Happy New Year to you, Cory.
Yes, and to you. Good to see you back.
So, yeah, we had a good break out there. Help me out here. Give me some advice. How far into a new year do you say Happy New Year? Like, because there's been people I haven't seen. Do I keep going till the end of the month? Do I keep going till end of February? When?
I don't know. It depends on whether, I mean, there's so many variables. I mean, do you genuinely care if they're having a Happy New Year, or is it just a formality? I mean, in that case, you might as well just say hello. But if you haven't seen it for a while and you're concerned, then take it to the end of the month.
All right, to the end of the month. So as soon as I get back, you're buggering off.
Yes, I'm going to escape for a little while.
Good for you. You deserve a rest. You're a hardworking man. But it's got to kind of tick you off, though, that you're leaving and the temperatures here are getting warmer, right? I mean, the forecast for the next couple of weeks here in Calgary is pretty good.
Yeah, but it's all relative, you know. I mean, as you can see with that trailer and the generator and all the good stuff I got to go sit in the desert there, it's still going to be, +5, +10 in Calgary. I'm going to be sitting in +21, +22 in the Tucson area. So I'll still be able to look down on what you're suffering for temperatures.
All right, but you be careful of snakes, right?
Oh, yeah. I always watch for those.
And scorpions. Anyways, we got a busy morning on the news site. Cory, you remember that teacher down in Ontario with the big boobs? I'm not even sure what they are anymore, transgendering or what. But the school board is bringing in rules. They're gonna come up with a dress code, and they're gonna try and stop this tomfoolery. Speaking of tomfoolery, the WHO, World Health Organization, wants masks to be put back on airplanes. To stop the new spread of COVID. So good luck with that. Spare a quarter for poor Elon Musk. In the last 4 months, he has lost $200 billion. That's billion with a B. So Guinness Book of World Records for the most amount of money lost by a single individual. But, I don't think we're going to have too many garage sales for still a few billion side. Our cartoon Chronicle has got a good one there. You can see right now that Danielle and Justin arguing about the just transition. And our parliamentary columnist David Creighton weighs in on the Three Amigos Summit, which is, I guess, ended now, but still some bilateral meetings going on between Trudeau and the Prime Minister or President of Mexico. Creighton weighs in on his thoughts on it, and as you can see by the headline, he calls it a dismal exercise in farcical delusions. So I think that means he doesn't like it, Cory. So that's what's our main section at the moment. Hey, have you been following along with this Prince Harry book in the last couple of weeks?
I'm ashamed to admit that I have, and it's just dark comedy that I can't turn away from.
It is. It's like a slow car crash. But are you on Team Harry or are you on Team William?
I'm more on Team William at this point. I mean, that's a family that really needs to regain a little bit of dignity, and Harry seems to be just determined to pull it right back down.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to read about his frostbitten todger, to be honest with you. But the reason I bring it up is our columnist Linda Slobodian will shortly have her take on it. I think she's a bit on Team William as well. So should be good shortly, Cory. And you have a great vacation, my friend.
Great. Thanks, Dave. We'll check in with you on here in 3 weeks.
Thanks, man.
All right, that is our news editor, Dave Naylor. As you can see, we cover everything, a little bit from some, I guess you could say, lighter stuff. Linda's going to be writing Slobodian. She writes on some deep issues and some important stuff quite often, but she'll be weighing in on the Prince William and Harry thing going on as well. And of course, lots of local news, national news, opinion, things like that. David Creighton, he's got his piece up there. His show has been doing fantastic. I mean, people are really enjoying it. So make sure to tune into that. Watch our channels, YouTube, Facebook, all of that stuff to see those productions we're putting out there. And of course, subscribe. That's the way we're doing it, guys. That's how we can pay the bills. That's how we don't take any government funding. Get on there, westernstandard.news/membership. $10 a month, 99 bucks a year. And you get full access to all of these stories, no paywall, none of those interruptions. And then we can keep those good reporters going like Jonathan Bradley, Nigel Hannaford in there screening through all that opinion stuff. That's the reason we could do it. So if you've subscribed already, guys, thank you. We really appreciate it. And if you haven't yet, get on there, guys, and take out a subscription. As well, as you can see, Nico's put that up there. Yeah, if you want to advertise on the show, hey, we've got spaces. Come on here and we will promote your product or service or whatever it might be. All right, let's look into a few other news items. We'll be getting to Michelle in a little while, but I've still got some other stuff to cover. I see, something that's kind of coming up. If you might remember, I mean, we had quite the thing going on in November. We were running out of children's Tylenol and Advil and all that and cold medications, and into December, and everybody's screaming, and of course the finger pointing is going on. Premier Smith, I guess, sourced some from Turkey, but it took a long time to get the Health Canada approval. And here we are, months later. It sounds like 250,000 bottles of it are going to be showing up in the province this weekend. But most of what the delay was meeting the Health Canada approvals. And that's where I get mixed on things. There's reasons we got standards, fair enough, and approvals. You don't want back alley medications coming in. But this was a well-established pharmaceutical company. I mean, we're talking about acetaminophen, not experimental drugs, things like that. And apparently this Turkish supplier, I mean, they supply a lot of European nations that hold it to very high standards. I just find it hard to believe, why does it take so damn long? I mean, if this is something that is pressing, if it's something that's more immediate, I mean, are the standards pretty straightforward, demonstrating how much medicinal content is within it? I guess some of it was the childproof caps. Okay, fair enough. I guess that was an oversight. That's part of what I've heard. Now, I'm not sure, but yes, I guess that's why it's going to the pharmacies first rather than on the shelves, because I guess the first run might not have proper childproof caps, which is a standard thing in Canada. I just get so frustrated. I understand the reasons for rules, but at the same time, why does bureaucracy have to be so damn slow? I mean, they just can't pivot. Whatever need there is, I'm sure the flu season will probably be finished by the time the shelves are fully stocked again. And maybe we'll learn from this. But I mean, it's funny. It's watching the people lined up and basically cheering for Smith to fail. And we've been watching that happening right from the moment she began on this. They're saying, oh, you're wasting your time trying to source it. But, if she hadn't gone out and got it on her own, we would be looking at shortages for months and months more. And they would certainly blame her for that as well. There's no winning. I don't know why the hell people go into politics on any level. If they're liberals, they get guys like me crawling all over them no matter what they're doing. And I'm sure it can't be pleasant. And of course, if they're conservative like Premier Smith, well, they certainly get it as well. I guess we should be thankful that some of those masochistic devils are into the business. Something that's been big in the news as well, speaking of, again, those double standards, what's going on out there. The F-35 jets. Suddenly, Trudeau says, these are the things to have. We're going to buy 88 of them for, what is it? 85 million, no, $19 billion. Now, back in a few years ago, when Trudeau was a leader of the opposition and he was running to be the prime minister, he said in no uncertain terms, Canada will not be buying these jet fighters. Something changed, and here we are. Suddenly, it's a revelation. Trudeau's saving the world. He's getting us up to date on these jets. The double standards are all over the place, and they didn't get any cheaper for waiting. Now, again, there's some discussions happening. People saying there were some questions that were unanswered 8-10 years ago when they were first looking at these that have now been resolved. I don't know. When it comes to military procurement, I mean, we look at David Creighton's already been laughing about, and they call it the Three Amigos Summit down in Mexico with the American president and the Mexican president and Trudeau. Trudeau desperately, he just really wants to be respected on the world scene, and it really hasn't happened. I mean, we see that. He embarrasses himself and us typically just about every time he leaves the country's borders. He gets chewed out at meetings from China. He insulted all of India for weeks on end before realizing what he was doing over there that other time. and basically has been shut out of important discussions and groups and things when it comes to NATO and stuff like that. Part of it is because Canada's military expenditures aren't even a fraction of what the commitment's supposed to be a NATO member. But our procurement, and it's not just Trudeau, this has been going on for decades. This has been going on since Mulroney and into Harper and Chrétien. We can't seem to get to upgrading. We can spend money, but nothing has come. So we got. I'm looking at this. The government spent almost $5 billion on some new warships. $5 billion. They haven't started building them yet. That's just in preparation because they've been spending decades on this crap. I mean, meanwhile, I don't know what they're out in now. Rowboats. I mean, the Navy is hopelessly out of date. And I mean, technology is integral when it comes to something like defense and things like that. And they think they might be able to get these things going within another couple of years to start building them. Sure enough, Irving is getting the contract, and they're talking about spending $300 billion on those ships. $300 billion to upgrade Canada's Navy. Now, maybe it's worth it. I don't know, but that's a lot of money. And if we look at, say, for example, the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which private dollars were going to build for, I think it was a $4.6 billion or something to begin with, it's up to an estimated $21 billion now that Justin Trudeau has gotten his grimy little hands on it, and it's still not moving any oil. So this $300 billion for these ships, I can't imagine what the price is going to be if and when they ever get done. If you really want to look into a sad, sad joke with the state of Canada's military affairs, I listened to a great piece on that with the sidearms, I guess, that military members in Canada are carrying. They're carrying sidearms that are literally of a World War II vintage. That's how old they are. Apparently, they're pretty good ones. They're good handguns, good solid ones, but come on, they're getting pretty old here, guys. And the government has been talking for like 50 years, government after government after government, about changing out these sidearms. They've spent like hundreds of millions of dollars to study and talk about and source and discuss procuring and think about it and test some things and check. And still to this day, they haven't gotten new ones. The person I listened to on that show said basically they could have gone to Cabela's, bought better handguns from all of those and just given them to the soldiers for probably 10% of that price. And they would have been newer, better sidearms. But this is Canada. Speaking of, I'm getting on that theme when I'm talking about bureaucracy. It ties everything up, it gums it up, and nothing can get done efficiently. Even the things that just seem so damn simple, we can't get them done. Brian Dara saying, I see another sub-disaster happening, regarding the planes. Yeah, I don't know. You see all sorts of disasters going on. The subs you might be speaking of. I mean, Canada some years ago bought some diesel submarines from Great Britain. I don't know if you remember that. It was quite a while back. And when they tried to get them back to Canada, one of them caught fire and it killed a soldier or a sailor or two in the process. We were buying their old used junk, basically. We couldn't even get it home without killing our own service members. And meanwhile, we have one of the largest Arctic coastlines in the world, and we can't get to it because we don't have nuclear subs. And even with this $300 billion they're talking about spending, that won't give us the nuclear sub capability. They're not buying those. So when we talk about sovereignty, we talk about Arctic sovereignty, we talk about getting up there, we can't even get there. If countries are going to argue with us about whether it's our domain or not, the first question they're going to ask is, well, can you access it? Well, no. Well, then how can you claim it? The United States is up there messing around under our ice. China's up there under the ice. Russia's under the ice. Who knows who else is up meddling around in there? Great Britain? Not us. As an Arctic country, we never had the foresight to think about perhaps getting the military means to get to every corner of our country. So, ugly condition there. What was it? I see Jim Hendry saying, yes, maybe give the military all the handguns that they're planning on seizing from legal gun owners. Yeah, but I think most of the legal gun owners, took their handguns out onto a Canadian Navy ship and they feared it was going to go down. So they threw all their guns over the side of the ship to, regain the ballast so it would keep floating. So those guns have all been reported lost. So I'm afraid there's nothing for the government to seize there. So yeah, it's just a sad running joke. Richard French saying those subs are apparently still in dry dock, and so Sean, saying they're dry docked in Halifax, So yeah, great investment. Another issue that's been a problem with the procurement and stuff through the Irving shipbuilders, I guess, is chronic strikes, of course, because it's a unionized setup and they can't get anything done up there. So I don't know. I feel for Canadian service members, whether they're on the ground or in the air or in the Navy. We can't just seem to outfit them. I remember one embarrassment before we get to Michelle. I'm going to get there really quickly. It was during one of the I don't know if it was the first Desert Storm in Iraq, or if it was the second time we were over there. But Canadian soldiers didn't have, what they had was olive green uniforms, which of course, when you're standing out in the desert, does not help you camouflage very well. And they were actually being lent like ponchos and blankets from other military forces just for their own safety, so they could cover up these dark green blots, because you kind of stand out in the Iraqi desert as this dark green blob out there when everything else is a sand color. Something as simple as camouflage outfits, and we can't seem to get that for our members. So bless those guys and women who are still surviving it out there. All right, so let's run a quick ad. Another way we pay those bills. Speaking of firearms, and we will get to our guest, Michelle Stirling. So let's hear a little bit from the Canadian Shooting Sports Association.
Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Without the CSSA, our gun rights would have been taken long ago. These guys are on the front lines helping to draft smart and intelligent firearms regulations and legislation in Canada, and more importantly, educating the public about how we keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. To become a member, it's absolutely worth every penny.
All right, well, here we are. We've got Michelle Stirling from the Friends of Science on. Hi, Michelle. It's good to have you back. I think you were one of my last guests when I kind of wrapped up the daily show I had on the go, and I'm glad we've got the chance to get you back on. So welcome back.
Thanks so much, and Happy New Year to everyone.
And to you. So yeah, you know, when I reached out, I mean, something that's big in the news, something a lot of discussions going on about is the just transition. You guys addressed that at length back in April, trying to, lay out what it's about and everything. But perhaps if we could start there, because people are now, of course, all arguing about what it may mean or what it's about. I mean, what is the just transition?
Well, it's hard to know. Like, it's a bit of a foggy day, if you like, when you look at the just transition, because there's a 9-page report on the government website that talks about the just transition and how they want to be good to workers who are in industries that will be phased out, presumably oil, gas, and coal. But what are they going to transition to? I mean, there's just no transition, if you like. So all the things like wind, solar, any novel form of energy like hydrogen, it all requires oil, gas, and coal to make the devices to power the units that install them, that maintain them, that back them up. So, what are they really talking about in a just transition? Because what are you going to transition to? You're going to transition to electricity? Well, electricity is a secondary form of energy. It's generated by something, usually natural gas, hydro, or coal, or nuclear, or maybe biomass. But, I have some statistics here from Natural Resources Canada, just to kind of put this in perspective for people. Of Canada's primary energy consumption in 2019, crude oil, natural gas, and natural gas liquids accounted for 71% of the total, uranium 16%, coal 5%, hydro 5%, and other renewables like biomass and wind and solar combined 3%. So we're not going to transition to wind and solar overnight or at all, because we're going to need oil, gas, and coal to make all those things. And excluding uranium, fossil fuels accounted for 76% of Canada's total primary energy supply in 2019. And biofuels, waste, 4%, and wind and solar, 1%. So they're deluding you, they're deceiving you, they're misleading the public, because there's no way that you can actually do this kind of transition. It's impossible. And it's also technically and economically impossible. We've got a report by Ken Gregory, our research director, and he did an analysis of decarbonization in the United States. It would cost trillions of dollars, 13 times the GDP of the US, to decarbonize the US. And we did an assessment of RBC's $2 trillion plan. And it's way, way, way underestimated. So, we have professional engineers who know how things work, rather than ENGOs that are modeling on a computer and going, look, we can make Canada run on hydro from Quebec. You can't. Quebec is already out of hydro with their present EV and electric heating policies in Quebec. Parker Gallant wrote an article about how throughout the coldest days of winter, it's natural gas in Ontario that's propping up Quebec. So, this is some kind of bizarre delusion by the federal government to think that they're going to transition to anything. That's my rant.
No problem. That's the ranting is what this show's about, and it's a good one. And part of it, I think, what gets a lot of people nervous, though, is okay. This government just doesn't seem to be working within common sense. But most of the economic indicators, world demand, indicate that there's going to be very strong demand for our oil and gas for decades to come. We have a labor shortage in the oil and gas sector right now. Why would we even be thinking about transitioning people out of it? We should be training people to get them into it. We should be maximizing our production for this world need. But that's what makes us fear that the government's going to push them out and create the need to transition them. And that's nerve-wracking.
Right. Well, I suspect that some of this bad advice has come from McKinsey and Company. I think everyone should read this book, and it will explain a lot of things that have happened in Canada because they've been a big advisor to the federal government. And we did a report called Grounded in Reality a couple of years ago that was countering smart prosperity. And at the time, McKinsey had come up with this notion that over the next decade, $60,000 jobs would be created every year in clean tech. Well, that never happened because that market doesn't exist. It's a non-starter. In the Just Transition Plan that I mentioned earlier, the government has $15 billion for investments, $15 billion for public transit, $17.6 billion for green recovery, whatever that is. These are billions of dollars that are just obviously flowing to the pockets of green grifters, green crony capitalists. And you have to realize, as you just said, the global energy demand is only going to grow. Western nations, this is North America and Europe, we're only 15% of the world's population. We have a report by Robert Lyman called When Giants Arise. And when you realize, all these developing nations like China, India, Brazil, Nigeria, and other places in Africa, these countries demand huge amounts of energy. They want the same kind of status and living circumstances that we have. And they don't care about the Paris Accord. They see it as a way of, really, I think our competitor nations see the Paris Accord as the perfect way to launch a green trade war against us by claiming that if we Canadians shut down our oil and gas, we will be saving the planet. In the meantime, they don't care. They'll just do whatever is best for their people. So, it's ironic to think that places that we might call dictatorships actually have governments that care more about their people than our government does.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hypocritical and it's heartless. I'm going to rant about McKinsey a little bit after this segment as well. I have them on deck because it's been coming to light. Just there's some pretty questionable dollars have been going towards that organization from our pocket. And as you said, and then the outcomes you get are that torqued sort of ideological crap that they advise and saying with these green jobs. Another area they talk about is these tech. And they just say tech is some broad, overwhelming thing. We'll just get everybody into tech. You'll all learn to code and you'll work making video games or something, or for Amazon. But again, when we're looking, all of the tech sector are shedding jobs right now. Twitter laid off thousands. Amazon's laying off thousands. All of the heavyweights out there, Shopify even, are cutting their staff dramatically. Why on earth would we be telling people, leave this booming industry that's paying you well, that has lots of world demand and will for decades, and jump into this sector that'll pay you half as much if you can find a job because they're laying everybody off right now? It's ludicrous.
Right. And I mean, I think people have to put two and two together here on big tech. Like McKinsey and the UNPRI have promoted high tech as clean, as if it doesn't have a carbon footprint at all. And you hear Apple saying, oh, we're 100% renewable. Google is 100% renewable. Well, guess what? These guys have just been buying renewable energy credits to make themselves look as if they're running on renewables. These are huge, huge energy consumers. So just imagine, you've been telling the public and investors, you've been playing your ESG game now for decades. You've been pretending that you're clean tech and that you have no carbon footprint. And all of a sudden, energy prices in the world skyrocket and your operation is in the dumper because you're not making money anymore. It used to look like, hey, you know, we're providing this virtual material to the world, so it has no carbon footprint. Well, in the back, it has a really big one, and now you have to pay double, triple, whatever for it. And the renewable credits market isn't going to do you any good because those are real costs. Anyway, yeah, and again, it's McKinsey that worked with Climate Works Foundation in the States to put together the Design to Win plan, and many of those people are the funders of the tar sands campaign against Alberta. So their objective was to push clean tech. They want to create, they actually want to create a sea change in the global economy, create 2 cap and trade systems worldwide. And ultimately the goal is for every person to have a personal carbon ration. And so, you know, how does that all relate back to the just transition? Well, I'm not too sure, but if you have a personal carbon ration, then I guess, you know, everyone can get climate money on your universal basic income. And, you know, these are all the factors that are playing into this just transition. And it might even be nationalizing the energy sector. That's what I think it probably will be.
Well, yeah, that's my fear as well. I mean, we're going to, you know, we're dealing with ideology rather than reality, unfortunately. And they seems when their ideology can't come to pass, then they go into trying to force it to happen. Just like they've been telling us for decades that everybody's going to get into electric vehicles. Everybody's going to move on to electric vehicles. Well, here we are after decades of billions of dollars of subsidies and pushing and flogging, and still only 5% of the population at best is getting these electric vehicles. So what are they saying now? Well, we're going to illegalize the combustion engine by 2035, so you'd better get into those things. They don't care that we won't have the infrastructure. They don't care that it'll decimate the economy. They just think they've got to force this to happen somehow, putting a cart before the horse, and it's going to cause catastrophic damage to our economy.
Yes, it will. And the big problems there, again, with this concept of transitioning is that there's not enough power generation in Canada. We'd need 10,000 more megawatts, and it takes so that would be 8 Site C dam equivalents. And it takes about 20 to 30 years to build one of those dams. And there aren't very many dam locations left in Canada that would be suitable, not to mention all the environmentalists would block it. But the other thing is there's no material supply chain for this. There's a great report by Simon Michaud. He did the work for the Finnish Geological Society, I think. And there's a good video online with him explaining. But Robert Lyman also did a short summary for us on our website called The Pursuit of the Impossible. And really, it would take decades, sometimes hundreds or thousands of years to mine sufficient minerals, critical minerals, for all these fancy utopian green plants. We're talking hundreds of years, billions, quadrillions of dollars. It's not going to happen. So, you know, we're really being led astray. I don't know if it's malfeasance, misfeasance, or just plain stupidity, but we're going down a path of deep, deep destruction.
Well, I wonder, do you think maybe at any point some of the larger developing nations, the ones that really do have that increased demand, are going to start speaking up? Like the vain selfishness of doing this transition when we have developing nations that desperately need affordable, reliable energy, and they're using some very non-environmentally friendly forms of generating energy because they have to. And if we would export our clean energy to them, it would actually be better for the environment overall, and of course, better for their prosperity. They must see that when we have a prime minister who says there's no business case for exporting natural gas, bizarrely, you know, and that's just to Germany. But I mean, I'm certain India, China, a lot of those nations down there that are really growing in leaps and bounds would happily take on some of these clean energies we could provide. Maybe they'll put some pressure on?
I don't know, because price, I think, is really the objective for these countries. Like people say, oh, let's ship our natural gas to China and India, and then we'll solve the air pollution problems there. Well, natural gas is a very complicated system. LNG is very complicated compared to coal. Coal, you just dig it from the ground, you can dump it on the ground. You don't need a high pressurized system for it. I mean, obviously, there are now very good coal plants, heli plants, where they're high efficiency, low emissions, and all coal plants pretty much use pulverized coal now, so it burns very clean. But in those poorer countries, coal is always going to be the first option because it's very affordable, it's abundant. You don't need, very high skill, highly skilled people to manage most of it. So price point will be a factor, but obviously there are other mid-range countries that would certainly buy from us if we could just get it to market. So again, think of the green trade war people. Think of who out there does not want our product on the market, and think of why. And it can also be an east-west division in Canada, I'm sorry to say, but there are interests down east who are invested in other energy sectors overseas. Why would they want the West to compete with them?
Oh, absolutely. And then, of course, OPEC nations, they do like having a strong control over energy prices. And the way they do that is by strangling supply, and they strangle their own output. But if they can, of course, even better for them, if they can slow the output in other nations, it's all the more profit for them as they keep the oil prices and gas prices artificially high. And you have to look at their interest in that. And that's gets back to a part of where a lot of these ENGOs get funded. But I don't know if there's ever any interest in pursuing or exposing that. I mean, Alberta talked about it, and we did our big report, and it just kind of fell by the wayside.
Yeah, well, there needs to be more done with the findings of the Alberta inquiry, because it's very obvious in Europe. And we have, excuse me, we have a blog post about this from Drew Godefridi, who's a Belgian philosopher and jurist. And he writes about how Russia funded the environmental groups in Europe to push Germany, especially, to buy gas from Russia. And so Germany has been funding the war against Ukraine.
Yeah.
Put it very bluntly, that's what's been happening. And because Russia funded these environmental groups. And there's quite a bit of evidence that similar things have happened here in Canada. So I don't have the specific details of that, but there are some reports out there. So again, it's a green trade war against Alberta. And the sooner we take off the blinkers, and stop talking about climate change. The Paris Agreement is not a legally binding document. Robert Lyman has many articles on this. And, we shouldn't play ball because we're only 1.6% of the world's emissions in Canada, all of Canada. And even the Parliamentary Budget Officer recently issued a report showing that there would be no change in global climate change, even if we met our targets. And even if we did nothing, there would be no damage to our economy. That's always the reason they say, oh, well, down the road, climate change is going to disastrously affect the economy. This is not true. It would be better if we were spending all these billions of dollars on preparing and adapting, upgrading the dike system out in the Fraser Valley, preparing Calgary for the next potential flood, because there probably will be one. These are all things that we can do with this money that are real adaptive things that will help people and give people real jobs, rather than all this make-believe unicorn utopia.
Yeah, well, in the just transition, whatever it might turn out to be, I mean, Trudeau has stated that that's going to be the priority of 2023, starting off the year, and he's certainly taking quite an aggressive stance with Alberta already. So I got a feeling we're going to be hearing a heck of a lot more about it as to whatever it might develop into. So I appreciate your speaking up and helping to define that and keeping with it. Before I let you go, so where can people find more information about Friends of Science and the work you guys do?
Well, we're on YouTube. We have a very funny little video about climate injustice for all, which is our report that we did about the just transition. And it features me sitting in the middle of a field in a chair. And that's how the just transition looks like it'll go. a chair in the middle of a field pretending to be a house. We're also at friendsofscience.org, our website. We're on Twitter, Friends O Science on Twitter, and Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. So we hope that people will engage with us. And it is our 20th year of operation. We have been asking people if they would just donate $20, or if you like, maybe take out a membership. You can do that on our website. And we're going to have a live event this year. So that's in the works. It's probably going to be sometime in May. So I hope people will be able to attend for our buffet dinner and 2 speakers.
Great. Well, we'll be watching for that. Well, thanks again for coming on to join us today, Michelle. It's always good to have a talk with you and just get a nice dose of some good common sense. And I really appreciate the work that you guys do out there. So keep at it, and I'm certain we'll talk again sometime soon.
Okay, thanks, Cory. Have a great trip.
Great, thank
Bon
you.
voyage.
So yes, Miss Michelle Stirling of Friends of Science. And as I said, it's always great to get her on just to clarify a lot of things. I mean, what's going on right now, trying to define, that just transition. And as I said, if you go to the Friends of Science, and you'll find it there, but the legislation itself still hasn't been fleshed out. So who knows, it could amount to a number of things, but we can certainly see a battle on the horizon. And the biggest thing is, as Michelle mentioned briefly too, is I fear as well, they're going to move towards nationalizing Alberta's and the West in general's energy. We got to remember, when things become a crisis, suddenly it's not Alberta's oil anymore, it's Canada's oil. And when oil is $10 a barrel, well, then it's Alberta's oil. And you guys, now it's a mess that you should shut down. We've seen it time and time again, and I don't see why we won't see it happen yet again. Just for one of the commenters, I see Kim Holmes saying, why has no one specified the oil sands are a huge cleanup measure, saying, grandfather spent time up there on Fort Mac and treats were stunted. And there were health issues before. I don't know how bad necessarily it was, but it is a surface deposit of petrochemicals that are in there, and it has always leached into the water bodies to a degree up there. Now, I know we can't pretend the motivation of the companies up there is to clean the area up. It just happens to be perhaps a side effect when you're taking the bitumen out of the sand and replacing it with clean sand, that it tends to be better in the end. But a lot of the stuff that energy companies are getting blamed for up there is actually pollutants, I guess you could say natural pollutants that have been happening up there for millions of years already. It really didn't have anything to do with us. But again, common sense doesn't seem to have a lot to do with a lot of these discussions. So let's see what else we got on the go here. I wanted to mention, so McKinsey, as Michelle mentioned as well. So they're a consulting company. They're an international one. They're huge. And, it's one of those names that just keeps popping up all over the place. And I tell you what, we can't blame this all on Trudeau. These guys show up as consultants all over the place. The province of Alberta gave those guys a contract for a few $1 million on a post-secondary education report or something like that they were putting together. But it has come to light, I guess, that Stephen Harper, when he was in over 7 years in power, and spent something in the neighborhood, I think, of $6 million or less in contracts to McKinsey, which is a pretty healthy contract if you got a small company or something. But since Trudeau got in his short time, I think it was 9 years with Harper and then seven years with Trudeau. Either way, the Liberal government since 2018 has paid $73 million to this McKinsey. And McKinsey is putting out these reports talking about these transitions. I mean, it's bad enough that we're giving this sort of stuff to these consultants. And you got to wonder, how much money do you really need to get these things? And then they give us this god-awful advice at the end of it and everything. So Pierre Poilievre has been making a lot of noise about that. It's kind of getting exposed, I guess, right now, that people are realizing, wow, that's some pretty healthy contracts to a single company there. And there was all sorts of government branches that were given 23 separate contracts for different things, from the Border Agency, Canada Post, Export Development Canada, Canadian Tourism, millions and millions of dollars to this company. And this is stuff we're getting. Now, I'll go back a little bit to energy here, because it's kind of the subject of the day anyways here going on. And a poll that came out, I don't know if it was Leger or one of the others. I just said that today, though, with Canadian support for expanding nuclear power generation. See, this shows I'm going to give you these numbers, and it'll show how delusional the citizens of this country are when it comes to things. Because the parallel between people who oppose development of nuclear energy with people who are pushing for all of us to embrace electric cars is quite striking. So, I mean, number one, province by province, for people who support expanding nuclear power generation, which is green, and Saskatchewan's got loads of uranium, we can do these things. Well, Saskatchewan's 57%. Alberta's 53%. And it drops in Ontario to 52%. Now we get to New Brunswick, 40%. Manitoba, 25%. BC, 24%. Nova Scotia, 24%. Newfoundland, 3%, only 3%. Quebec, they have negative 25%. No, they don't just not support expanding it, they are wholeheartedly in opposition to it. So these provinces, all the same provinces that strongly support this big green transition away from carbon-based energies, also are completely opposed to the nuclear we would need to use to replace it. Which one's it going to be, you guys? They just don't think it through. Think farther. You want to get rid of oil and gas. Okay, good for you. You're a genius. You're brilliant. You're going to save the world. You got to come up with the alternative. And we don't have one. The closest we've got, maybe, and it's terribly expensive and it takes a while to get going, is nuclear. But you clowns oppose that too. There's no herds of unicorns galloping across the prairies to make this power. Michelle talked about it too. Hydroelectric. You notice too, there's no coincidence why Newfoundland and Quebec are so strongly opposed to this. They're also making a fortune selling hydroelectric power. They don't want competitors. They don't need it. They're selling all the power they can. We can't. What are we going to dam? Which giant rivers in Saskatchewan and Alberta can we dam up to create the hydroelectric power grid that we would need? Or the wind and solar, come on, Alberta's been putting billions into it for years. At best, it's a supplemental novelty. There's that fantastic Twitter account. I got to keep that account on hand that shows the breakdown of the amount of solar and wind being used at any given time, the percentage of energy is generating. And typically solar in wintertime, you're looking at like 0.1% of Alberta's needs, even though we've been putting billions into it. There's a huge solar project going in out by Vulcan. If you go towards the Little Bow Park, holy cow, you drive and you just see those panels going and going and going. For what? For what? Yet, like I said, the regional imbalance, the problems, and Michelle kind of, she likes to talk broadly. I'm the regionalist around here, and that's fine. I'll say it. It's an East versus West thing. Look at the polling numbers again. They oppose our current generation systems, and they oppose any alternatives we would pursue. Guys, this isn't, speaking of sustainability, a word that gets tossed around and abused a lot. Their approach is not sustainable. We will freeze in the dark. And that would be a beautiful irony, wouldn't it? Alberta freezing in the dark while we sit on some of the most generous resource deposits in the world. Not just Alberta, Saskatchewan, British Columbia. I shouldn't neglect mentioning them. They've got fantastic resource deposits. Quebec has a huge natural gas deposit, by the way. Not enough people talk about that. They shut it down. They won't allow any development on it. Those parasites, and they are, if you're going to sit on a tremendous resource and refuse to develop it while sucking in billions a year in equalization from the other provinces that are developing and selling their resources, don't get upset when I call you a parasite, because that's what you're being. And that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem with equalization. That's part of the problem with universal basic income systems. When you give them money to do nothing, guess what they're going to continue to do? Nothing. If they developed their natural gas in Quebec, guess what? Well, suddenly they got non-renewable resource revenue, and it'll come up, take a bite out of their bloody equalization. So, of course, they don't want to develop it. They're hypocrites. And again, it leads to higher energy prices. It leads to the regional fighting. It leads to the imbalances. So we got to call it out more. Got to call it out. And it is regional. And yeah. Before I get on, we'll talk to the Jim in a moment with the agricultural report. One other thing I want to note, it's kind of interesting. The NDP, I guess they got sued and settled. They were talking about, they accused a lawyer of making an Enron secret backroom deal in 2000 over the PPA. So this is a complex thing and everything else. The bottom line is it's settled. So the lawyer who sued the NDP government for their statements at that time. He basically won. Now, at this point, one of the settlements of the ways these things work is you can't talk about what the settlement is. So he's already said, I can't talk any further about it. But I assure you, the NDP didn't win. When it's settled like that, it means he took his check, signed off, say he's not going to talk about it anymore, and it's finished. Again, I mean, you got to think of things like that with Nenshi when he slandered business owners and so on, and he settles. I mean, some people say Nenshi didn't lose that lawsuit. Sure he did. He had to give out a sniveling apology. And he had to pay for his own legal bills, well, or at least fundraise to do it, which was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Guys, that's not winning. You got a pretty twisted view of what winning is, if that's what you think. But it's good to see, I guess, some civil victories in courts, because when governments and political leaders like Nenshi or Notley play political football and ruin the character of prominent business people like this and lawyers like this for their own political gain, they should pay a bloody price for it. Because that's what happened in both cases. Nenshi went after Cal Wenzel and attacked his character because Nenshi wanted to score political points, and he thankfully got stung on his ass for it. And likewise, the NDP, even though it took a few years to catch up to them, it did catch up to them. So I just want to remind folks and rub that in a little, guys. Sometimes there can be a little bit of accountability. It's never enough, and it always comes too late, but it's still better than nothing. All right, let's change the channel a little bit and get on with our check-in with Jim Busicum of Marketplace Commodities and see what's happening out there in the ag commodity world. Hey, Jim, how's it going?
Hey, good, Cory. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Got a good rant on. Always, good for the soul, for me anyway.
Yeah, it's good for a lot of us, I think. So that's good. You bet. So,
so we're a couple weeks into the new year. How are the commodity markets shaping up?
Well, actually, I would say we got a small, let's call it a short-term trend right now. We'll see short-term downtrend right now. We'll see if it develops into a longer-term downtrend. But just running through some of the major commodities, canola has moved from 881 per metric ton to 831 right now. Barley 455 down to 430. Wheat trading at around $12 a bushel to start the year, now down to 11.50 per bushel. Corn market 460 to start the year, now down to about 435. We especially on barley compared to corn, that's what's really driving the barley market lower, as in the feed market, livestock feeders, they consider corn and barley roughly about the same price. So barley's reluctantly moving lower into the same level of what U.S. corn lands in months per jet. So
I guess some of the pressure is coming. You got world events that are a little more abstract coming, like Russia, Ukraine. Ironically, while they're in the midst of all that conflict, they've still got some very seriously heavy crops coming out.
Yeah, Russia essentially had a bumper crop in 2022, had very good yields. I'm not exactly sure on Ukraine. I think the information isn't quite as good coming out of there. Now, they're behind on their shipping into their export markets because, of course, of what's going on. But from what we understand is shipping companies, steamship lines have a difficulty. Well, they're able to get insured to go into Russian ports, but it's costing more, which is largely being absorbed by a lower FOB price out of Russia. So they're still shipping. The product is still going from Russian port to end users, which directly competes with, well, really with Canada, with everywhere else in the world. It's large. Both countries produce large amounts of the same commodities that we do. So in the world market, we're competing with that. And then if we want to look at another area, the Southern Hemisphere is where there's, some significant crops just starting to be harvested right now. That's Argentina and Brazil. Argentina was on the dry side, which has supported corn and bean market to some extent. Brazil's looking really good, though. Looks like they're going to have bumper crops. They're still dealing with their geopolitical issues as well. I almost forgot they'd had an election, but don't really see too much of it in the mainstream media. But anyway, they're still contesting that and leading to issues with trucking and ports and road closures, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, it's easy to forget that, Brazil and Argentina, I mean, those are huge agricultural producers, beef and a number of other commodities. So, I mean, we don't pay enough attention to them, but they make an impact to most of us over on the side of the hemisphere, I guess.
Yeah, so the way it's going in 2023 is we're starting off with actually fairly decent supplies of most of these commodities all around the world, including Canada. The Northern Hemisphere will be going into a new production cycle starting about March, April. Further south, you work your way back up into Canada, which we would consider the north. And we'll see what that entails once we get into the springtime as far as production goes.
Great. Well, always lots to watch and fluid markets going on as with everything. Anything else you'd like to add before I let you go today, Jim?
No, that's it, Cory. Thank you for your time and appreciate it.
Great. Good talking to you. We'll talk to you again soon. All right. So it's that reminder, everybody. Yes. And that's Jim Buzicum with Market Commodities. And you can get to them at marketcommodities.com, or if you're listening in, 403-394-1711. You know, it's important if you're in the ag business, you need to know what's going on out there so you can maximize your business. All right. So, what was that? Tammy Day bring up whether Brian had watched the Grand Tour when the electric car crashed. It was serious wreckage that burned for a long time. Yeah, I don't know if anybody who watches that show. It's quite funny. It's Jeremy Clarkson and some of the others, and I think it was in Czechoslovakia or something. It was an electric vehicle, but it was a sports one, like very, very high tech and high end. I mean, those things can really move fast. And he went off the road and flipped, and he got terribly injured, but he did survive. But yeah, that thing just kept burning and burning. The batteries, again, there's a lot of challenges to come with these EVs yet. I mean, I'm not wholly opposed to them. I'm not. Look, if somebody comes up with the technology that you can have an affordable, reliable electric vehicle, and our electric grid can handle it, and it can go with the ranges and all those things, I'll buy one. When it gets better and becomes worthwhile, I switch. I've got 2 drills at home. I got the battery powered one, and I got one I plug into my wall. I can't remember the last time I used the one I plug into the wall because the battery powered drills have gotten that good. But I didn't need some ding dong from the government to ban me from using a plug-in drill to drive me to the battery powered drill. The thing that got me there was it became better. It was a better product. The old battery-driven drills from 30 years ago, they would take forever to charge. The batteries wouldn't last terribly long. They'd wear out and wouldn't be any good. They wouldn't be powerful enough. That's changed. You know, you see battery-powered sawzalls and all sorts of things. Things might change. I think they will change, but we can't rush them. We got to wait until the technology gets good enough. As Nico brought that up, yeah, the electric car rebate. I was talking about the rebate program is 150% over budget. This is where the government is basically paying people to buy these stinking electric vehicles because they're so bloody expensive. They're saying that's the way to get people into it. And as I said, when I was talking to Michelle, they aren't getting into them. We're still looking at 5%. And, but we're spending a fortune, 150% over budget, guys. And it's not working. That's the big thing. It's not working. Those are $750 million in these rebates given to people. Subsidies is what it's called. Quit getting around it. People are struggling. How many people with young families and that are driving the old beater to try and get to the store and back and get their kids to school and do all that stuff, trying to make the bills? Meanwhile, you're giving rich people $5,000 to get into a $90,000 Tesla. Yeah, that's social justice indeed. Good work, Justin. Thanks. I know. Justin just thinks the chauffeur can take you. If you need different groceries, get your chef to pick them out. Justin doesn't quite understand the real world. Unfortunately, he does impact and control our real world, and it's causing us a lot of problems. On a bright note, I'll kind of wrap up. I see Saskatchewan is auctioning off liquor licenses February 6th from they're closing the government-owned liquor stores. This has been going for a long time. Saskatchewan has a lot of crown corporations. They had the NDP in for quite a while over there, and one of the no-brainers is privatizing liquor stores. The government doesn't need to be in the business of running liquor stores. And I tell you what, guys, in Saskatchewan, I know we got a lot of viewers and readers from out there. It's great. Alberta Klein privatized them decades ago, and it's great. I don't drink anymore, but all the same, you've got access, 7 days a week, late into the evenings. The variety is incredible. The cost competitiveness, it's still expensive for liquor, but compared to how it used to be when there was only a small amount of boozes you could get and they'd be warm and they'd be going on strike every couple of weeks and there was only limited branches. Sucked. Saskatchewan, good on you. Looking forward to those auctions. You're going to get some good creative business people getting into that, and you will enjoy it. You will not want to turn back. Lori Carter saying liquor and pot stores in every quarter. Yeah, that's true. And they're all over the place. I don't smoke pot either. Stuff that makes me sick. Always made me puke. But I got nothing against the people who want to smoke it, as long as they aren't doing anything dangerous or operating equipment, that sort of thing. But there's too many pot shops, but you're starting to see them close. The market is catching up. There were too many of them. They flooded the market, and now the stronger are surviving, and some of the others are going to the wayside. All right, I'm going to wrap things up. So as I've said to you guys at the start of the show, I am going to disappear for 2 weeks. Jane and I are going to pop down to Arizona, get some sun, get some desert time, just get some quiet time. It's going to be nice, a nice breather. from the weather, from Canadian news, though, I'll still be watching. I am going to throw up a couple of audio podcasts because I'll still have to rant while I'm down there. So go to the Western Standard podcast site. They're on Podbean. You can search it out and you'll get those. And of course, I will be back and we'll be producing more shows. There's lots of other content out there. Melanie Risden's always putting out great stuff. David Creighton's show has just been fantastic. So tune into that stuff and I will see you all, well, I guess 3 weeks from now on the next show. Thanks, guys.